In the autumn of 1954, a steelworker's wife in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, ran a 7-room house on $19 a week and never apologized for what was on the table. She had no dishwasher, no dryer. She had a wringer washer, a percolator, and a small green notebook in the kitchen drawer where her mother had written what to do with vinegar, with bluing, with bacon grease, with a guest who knocked at 4 in the afternoon. The notebook went into a box in her daughter's attic in 1987. 40 years later, the daughter opened it. Most of what was inside would outperform any cleaning product, any cookbook, any hospitality manual sold today. They did not call it housekeeping, they called it keeping house. The difference was the whole world. Housekeeping was the chore. Keeping house was the calling. It meant a woman knew what to do at 4 in the afternoon when company arrived and the floor had not been swept. It meant she could feed 7 people on what would feed 3 today. The system had not come from a magazine. It had come from her mother. Then her daughters decided keeping house was beneath them. We did not lose this knowledge. We chose to call it servitude. Number 21 on this list cost less than a nickel and made a kitchen smell like a different house inside of 2 minutes. Number 14 contradicted every modern cleaning rule, and the women who kept doing it had whiter sheets than any laundry on the block. And number 2, the rule that 50s mothers drilled into their daughters more strictly than any other, was about a single object on the kitchen counter that no household today even owns. These 25 tricks were not about being tidy, they were about being ready. Ready for the visit, ready for the weather, ready for the week. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 lost household tricks every 1950s housewife used for cleaning, cooking, and comfort. Number 25. The open window first. Before the broom came out, every window on the east side of the house was raised 3 inches for 5 minutes, even in January. For a young mother in 1953 in Cleveland with 2 children and a coal furnace, the open window was the first chore of the day. The cold air was the point. It took the night out of the house. Women called this airing the house. There was no scented candle. There was a window and the sky outside it. Number 24. The baking soda on the carpet. Before vacuuming any rug, a 50-cent box of baking soda was sprinkled across it and left for half an hour. The vacuum came after. For a coal miner's wife in 1956 in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, who could not afford new carpets every 2 years, the baking soda was the difference between a rug that lasted 9 years and one that smelled like the dog after 18 months. Nothing was bought. Nothing was sprayed. The carpet just stopped smelling like the people who walked on it. Number 23. The vinegar in the rinse water. Every floor was washed with warm water and 1/2 cup of white vinegar. No soap. For a Polish grandmother in 1954 in Hamtramck, Michigan, who scrubbed the linoleum every Saturday, the vinegar was the lesson her own mother had taught her in the old country. It cut the grease and left no film. Modern cleaning products are designed to leave residue so you can smell that they worked. Vinegar leaves nothing. The clean is invisible. That was the proof that it was real. Number 22. Bluing in the white wash. A few drops of liquid bluing went into the rinse of every load of white sheets, white shirts, white pillowcases. The blue counteracted the yellow that any white fabric develops over time. For a Methodist preacher's wife in 1955 in Macon, Georgia, hanging her husband's collars on the line every Tuesday, the bluing was the reputation of the household. People walking past saw the wash on the line. The white had to be white. Bluing did it for a nickel and never wore out. Number 21. the lemon and the cutting board. Every wooden cutting board was scrubbed with the cut side of half a lemon and a tablespoon of coarse salt after every use. For a butcher's wife in 1952, Chicago, managing a kitchen where meat was cut 3 times a day, the lemon was the entire sanitation system. The acid killed what the salt did not scrub off. There was no spray. A lemon did 3 jobs in a 50s kitchen. A modern kitchen needs 3 products to do the same work. Number 20, the newspaper on the windows. Glass was cleaned with vinegar water and crumpled newspaper, never paper towels. For a Lutheran widow in 1957, Milwaukee, washing the storm windows in October, the newspaper was the trick her mother had brought from Bremen. The paper was firm enough to scrub, and the ink polished the glass. We threw the newspaper away when paper towels arrived and never noticed the windows started streaking again. The fix had been in the trash all along. Number 19, the cast iron wipe down. The skillet was never washed with soap. It was wiped with a damp cloth, dried on the burner for 30 seconds, and rubbed with a teaspoon of bacon grease before being hung back on the hook. For a Tennessee farm wife in 1954 feeding 6 men 3 meals a day, the skillet was the most important object in the house after the husband. Soap would have killed it. The grease kept it alive. The pan held the memory of every meal that had ever crossed it. That was the inheritance. Number 18, the bread dough on the counter. 6 loaves were started every Saturday at 6 o'clock and finished by noon. The dough rose under a clean tea towel on the back of the stove. For an Italian-American mother of 4 in Hoboken in 1953, the Saturday bread was not a chore. It was the week. The smell of the rising dough told the house that the weekend had begun. Store bread cost 20 cents. Homemade cost 3 cents and a morning. The morning was not the price. The morning was the gift. Number 17, the lid on the pot. Every pot on the stove had its lid on. Always. Steam was money. Heat that escaped was heat that had been paid for. For a railroad worker's wife in 1956 in Altoona, cooking on a gas range she had finally been able to afford, the lid cut cooking time by 1/3 and kept the moisture in the meat. We learned to cook with lids off because we saw it on television. The women who taught us better had been dead for 10 years by then. Here is what nobody talks about. The average American woman in 1955 spent 50 hours a week on housework. The average American woman today spends 18 hours a week. The 7-room house was kept by 1 set of hands. The 500-square-foot apartment cannot be kept clean today by 2 adults with 2 incomes. The math does not work. Something other than time was being spent in 1955. Attention, order, a sense that the house was the work, not the obstacle to the work. We were told we had been liberated. What we were liberated into was a society that no longer knows what a clean kitchen smells like in the morning. Number 16, the damp tea towel on the bread. Sliced bread, biscuits, rolls of any kind were kept under a damp tea towel on the counter, never in a plastic bag. For a Sicilian baker's daughter in 1954, Brooklyn, keeping her father's bread for her children, the damp towel was the only correct way. Plastic suffocated the bread. The towel let it breathe. Bread stored under a towel stayed soft for 3 days. Bread in a bag turned to gum in 1. We chose the bag because the bag was modern. The bread paid the price. Number 15, the ironed pillowcase. Every pillowcase was ironed flat with a hot iron after washing, 2 minutes per case. For an insurance salesman's wife in 1955, Toledo, with 4 beds to make every morning, the ironed pillowcase was the difference between a bedroom and a hotel room. A crisp surface signaled a household that was running. A wrinkled one signaled the opposite. No guest who slept under that ceiling needed to be told the family was decent. The pillowcase said it before breakfast. Number 14. The rinse with cold. Every load was given a final rinse in cold water, even after a hot wash. The cold closed the fibers. The clothes lasted longer. Colors stayed truer. For a sharecropper's daughter in 1953, Detroit, who had moved north and now had a Maytag wringer washer in her kitchen, the cold rinse was the wisdom her grandmother had taught her in 1934. The women who knew better always finished cold. The clothes outlasted the washer. Number 13. The hot water in the kettle. The kettle was never empty. It sat on the back of the stove, half filled, ready to be moved forward at a moment's notice. For a Welsh immigrant in 1954, Scranton, expecting her sister-in-law any Tuesday at 3, the kettle was the entire welcome. The guest did not knock and wait while water was found. A cup was poured within 2 minutes. We stopped keeping the kettle full when we got electric coffee makers, and we never noticed that the front door had started to feel slower to people who arrived at it. Number 12. The coffee grounds in the coffee can. Used grounds were not thrown out. They were dried on a sheet of newspaper and saved in a tin can under the sink. For a Norwegian-American homemaker in 1956 Minneapolis, cleaning her copper-bottomed pots after Sunday dinner, the grounds were the Polish. The grit scrubbed the copper, and the oil from the bean kept the surface from oxidizing. The same can was also taken into the garden in May. Nothing in a 50s kitchen was thrown out the first time. Everything had at least one more job in it. Number 11. The vinegar steam on the walls. Once a month, a pot of water with 1 cup of vinegar was set to a low boil for 40 minutes, with all the doors open. The steam went into the walls. The grease that had settled on the kitchen paint above the range was loosened, and a damp cloth took it off with 1 wipe. For a steelworker's wife in 1956, Gary, Indiana, whose husband fried bacon every Saturday for 15 years, the vinegar steam was the only thing between her kitchen and the slow yellowing that swallowed less attentive neighbors. The trick cost 12 cents. In 1963, the United States Department of Agriculture published a study comparing household efficiency in working-class kitchens across 3 generations of women in the same families. The researchers expected to find the youngest generation, equipped with new appliances, was the most efficient. They found the opposite. The grandmothers, who had been keeping house since the 1920s, completed more daily tasks in less time than their granddaughters with the new electric mixers and refrigerators. The researchers eventually concluded the older women had what they called task discipline. They started the wash before breakfast. They started the bread before the wash. Every task overlapped with the next. The new appliances had given the granddaughters time. The granddaughters had used the time to do one thing at a time. The math had gone the wrong way. Number 10. The mending basket by the chair. A small basket of clothing that needed buttons or hems sat next to the most used chair in the living room. Every evening, while the radio played, the wife pulled out one item and finished it before bed. For an Iowa farm wife in 1957 who had 4 children in school and $12 a year for new clothes, the mending basket was the entire wardrobe budget. Clothes did not get thrown out because a button was missing. We replaced the basket with a thrift store and called it sustainability. Number 9. The bowl of salt in the oven. A salt bowl removes oven odors and moisture. After a roast came out of the oven, a small bowl of salt was placed inside while the oven cooled. The salt absorbed the smell of the meat and any moisture. The oven was ready to bake a pie the next morning without the pie tasting like Sunday's beef. For a Massachusetts grocer's wife in 1954, feeding 11 people every Sunday, the salt was the secret to a kitchen that did not have to choose between roasting and baking on consecutive days. Modern ovens have a self-clean cycle that costs 3 hours of electricity. The bowl of salt cost a teaspoon. Number 8. The schedule on the inside of the cupboard door. Taped inside the door of every 50s housewife's main kitchen cupboard was a small handwritten list. Monday, wash. Tuesday, iron. Wednesday, clean. Thursday, market. Friday, bake. Saturday, yard and mending. Sunday, rest and visit. For a young Catholic mother in 1956 Buffalo with 3 children under 5, the schedule was not a tyranny. It was a permission slip. The list told her what did not have to be done today. Modern productivity systems require apps and paid subscriptions. The 50s version cost an index card and a piece of tape. Number 7. The crust on the pie. Pie crust was made with cold lard and ice water. Never butter, never oil. The lard came from the rendered fat of the last roast, saved in a jar in the icebox. For a West Virginia coal mining wife in 1955 who baked 4 pies every Friday for a family of 7, the lard crust was the lesson her grandmother had taught her at age 9. Butter crusts came apart. Oil crusts tasted like nothing. A woman who could not make pie crust in 1955 was a woman who had not been taught. A woman who could make it could make the rest of the meals stretch in ways the husband would never have to ask about. Number 6. The hand on the forehead at bedtime. Every 50s mother walked through her children's rooms before her own bedtime and placed her right hand briefly on each child's forehead. Not to wake them, just to feel. For a young mother in 1954 Indianapolis whose oldest son had a fever once a month, the hand was the only thermometer she trusted. But the hand did something else. The hand counted the children, every night, by touch. A mother who put her hand on 3 foreheads went to bed knowing all 3 were breathing. There is no app today that delivers that information so completely. Number 5. The stew on Wednesday. Whatever was left of the Sunday roast became Monday's hash and Wednesday's stew. The stew was almost always better than the original meal. For a Pennsylvania Dutch grandmother in 1953 in Lancaster, cooking for her widowed son and his 4 children, the Wednesday stew was the entire week's economy. Carrots from the garden, potatoes from the cellar, the last of the roast, cubed small. The stew fed the family for 2 nights. We threw away the leftover roast and called it convenience. The grandmother would have called it sin. Number 4. The hot iron on the damp cloth. Stuck on food, scorched pots, the inside of the refrigerator, the fabric of the couch. Anything that needed a deep clean was treated with a damp cloth and a hot iron. The steam loosened what scrubbing could not move. For a beautician's wife in 1957, Akron, whose husband tracked hair dye through the kitchen every Saturday, the hot iron was the trick her mother had passed down. 2 seconds of steam did the work of 5 minutes of scrubbing. Modern cleaning sells the scrubbing, and the 50s housewife accepted less labor. Number 3. The glass of water by the bed. A small glass of cold water, covered with a clean linen napkin, sat on the night table of every guest bedroom and every elderly relative's room. It was refilled before bed. For a Quaker widow in 1954, Philadelphia, hosting her sister-in-law for 3 weeks every spring, the glass of water was the entire hospitality of the house. The guest woke at 3 in the morning, thirsty. The glass was there. No light had to be turned on. No kitchen had to be found. A host who put a glass of water by the bed had thought about the guest at a moment the guest would not have thought about herself. That was the whole craft. Number 2, the coffee pot on the stove. The percolator went on the burner at 6:20 every morning. The first cup was the husband's. The second was the wife's. The third was for whoever came to the back door before 9. For a Slovenian-American steelworker's wife in 1954, Pittsburgh, the coffee pot was not an appliance. It was a doorway. Anyone who knocked on the back kitchen door before noon could have a cup. The neighbor with the dying mother, the milkman with the cold hands, the priest collecting for the parish. The cup was poured before the conversation began. The coffee was the welcome and the answer at the same time. We replaced the percolator with the single-serve machine and lost the second person in the room. Number 1, make the bed. That is all. Every bed was made before breakfast. Not later, not after the children left. Before the first cup of coffee was had, every bed was pulled tight, the pillows fluffed, the spread straightened. For a young wife in 1952, anywhere in the United States, the made bed was the entire day. A made bed said the house was running. An unmade bed said it was not. The rule had no exceptions. Sick day, snow day, funeral day, the beds were made by 7. The single discipline of the made bed organized every other discipline in the house. The wife who made the bed did not negotiate with herself about whether she would also do the wash. She was already in motion. She had already won the morning. None of this required money. None of it required a degree. None of it required a single product that could not be found in a 5 and dime in 1954. It required a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, a neighbor who had watched you grow up and was not afraid to tell you that your sheets were gray. The window opened in the morning, the lemon on the cutting board, the bluing in the rinse water, the kettle on the back of the stove, the percolator at 6:20, the hand on the forehead at 10, the bed made before breakfast. These were not the habits of women who had no choice. These were the habits of women who had decided that the house was the most important thing they would ever build, and that everyone inside it would know they had been kept. The daughters threw the notebook in the attic. The granddaughters never opened the box. The notebook is still up there. The kettle is still on the back of the stove. The only thing missing is the woman who used to fill it before the first knock at the door.